Iran has dismissed a United States peace plan to pause the war in the Middle East as it launched more attacks on Israel and Gulf Arab countries. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez said the impact of the ongoing war in the Middle East presents a far worse scenario than the U.S. invasion of Iraq in 2003.
Hungary will gradually halt gas exports to Ukraine until Kiev resumes all shipments through the Druzhba pipeline, announced Hungarian Prime Minister.
Iran has dismissed a United States peace plan to pause the war in the Middle East as it launched more attacks on Israel and Gulf Arab countries, including an assault that sparked a huge fire at Kuwait International Airport. Iranian state television's English-language broadcaster Press TV made the announcement, which came after Pakistan transmitted the proposal to Iran. Earlier on Wednesday, Iran mocked U.S. attempts at a ceasefire deal, insisting that they had not taken part in any negotiations.
سطح خوددرگیری‌هایتان به مرحله مذاکره خودتان با خودتان رسیده؟ قدرت راهبردی که از آن دم می‌زدید تبدیل به شکست راهبردی شده. مدعی ابرقدرتی دنیا اگر می‌توانست از این مخمسه رها شود تا حالا شده بود. اسم شکستتان را توافق نگذارید. دوران وعده‌هایتان به سر رسیده.
The broadcast from Press TV included a counter-proposal from Iran, a 5-point plan that included a halt to killings of its officials, means to make sure no other war is waged against it, reparations for the war, the end of hostilities, and Iran's, quote, exercise of sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz.
President Trump has said that those talks to potentially end the war with Iran are continuing and that the US is in talks with the right people. He also alluded rather cryptically to a very big present in the way of oil and gas being gifted from Tehran. Now, several media agencies are reporting that a 15-point dossier has been handed to the Iranians from the US via Pakistan. That said, Iranian officials are still denying that these talks are even taking place. Yesterday in Doha in Qatar, there was a Ministry of Foreign Affairs briefing where officials said they would not be hosting these mediation talks because they're just too busy defending and protecting their country. They did add, however, that Iran has been here for millennia, countries need to live and work together, and that it's now up to Iran to rebuild that trust across the region. Here in the UAE, the intensity of our attacks has definitely dropped. However, we still are hearing military jets flying pretty low overhead, feels like every 5 minutes over the last 2 evenings. In the wider region, of course, Lebanon is still being subject to intense bombings. And in the early hours of this morning at Kuwait Airport, a drone attack there resulted in a major fire. Jane Witherspoon, Euronews in Dubai.
Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez said the impact of the ongoing war in the Middle East presents a far worse scenario than the U.S. invasion of Iraq in 2003. He called the war absurd, illegal, and cruel in an address to Parliament on Wednesday.
Es que no estamos ante el mismo escenario que en la guerra ilegal de Irak. Estamos en algo mucho peor, con un potencial de impacto mucho más amplio y mucho más profundo. Vamos a exigir que esta guerra pare, porque no es justo que unos incendien el mundo y los demás tengamos que tragarnos sus cenizas. No es justo que los españoles y españolas y el resto de europeos y europeas tengan que pagar de su bolsillo la factura de esta guerra ilegal. No es justo que países con menos recursos que Occidente, pienso en África, pienso en la América Latina, vayan a sufrir las terribles consecuencias de esta sinrazón.
The Spanish premier has refused to allow Washington to use his country's military bases against Iran, despite U.S. President Donald Trump's threat to sever trade with Spain as a result. Last week, Sanchez's government approved a sweeping package worth €5 billion aimed at cushioning the economic impact of the war, which included reductions on taxes on fuel.
Hungary will gradually halt gas exports to Ukraine until Kiev resumes all shipments through the Druzhba pipeline. The move was announced on Wednesday by the country's Prime Minister Viktor Orbán.
Az olajblokkád letörése és Magyarország biztonságos energiaellátása érdekében most újabb intézkedésre van szükség. Ezért a Magyarországról Ukrajnába irányuló gázszállításokat fokozatosan leállítjuk, és az így nálunk maradó gázmennyiséget itthon betároljuk. Amíg Ukrajna nem ad olajat, Magyarország irányából nem kap gázt.
Hungary and Ukraine are locked in a dispute over the Soviet-era Druzhba pipeline, which carries Russian oil to Hungary and Slovakia. The pipeline was damaged in a Russian strike in late January. Both Hungary and Slovakia accuse Ukraine of using the issue for political gain. Orbán's government has repeatedly alleged that Kiev is trying to trigger an energy crisis ahead of Hungary's general election next month. Ukraine, for its part, has called on Hungary and Slovakia to decouple from Russian fossil fuels. According to Ukraine's energy analytic company Expro, Kiev imported over 2.9 billion cubic meters of natural gas from Hungary in 2025, accounting for 45% of the nation's total imports.
Libyan authorities have released a video and photographs showing a tow line attached to the damaged Russian gas tanker Arctic Metagaz, which has been drifting in the Mediterranean Sea for the past 3 weeks following an alleged attack by a maritime drone. The vessel is part of Russia's so-called shadow fleet, which transports fossil fuels in violation of international sanctions. The Libyan Coast Guard reported that the tanker carrying liquefied natural gas is being towed to a safe zone near the city of Zurara on Libya's western coast. Russian authorities claim that the Arctic Metagaz was damaged by Ukrainian maritime drones near Maltese waters. All crew members were rescued and Ukraine has not yet commented on the situation. According to the World Wildlife Fund, the Russian tanker was carried toward the Libyan coast by winds and currents. The environmental organization warns of serious environmental risks to one of the most vulnerable and biodiverse marine areas in the Mediterranean Sea.
Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen's Social Democrats finished first in Denmark's general elections, but lost ground compared with the last election in 2022, as did her two partners in the outgoing government. Official results showed neither left-leaning nor right-leaning blocs won a majority in parliament. The left bloc was credited with 84 seats in the 179-seat parliament and the right with 77, while 90 are needed for a majority. The centrist moderate party, headed by Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen, became kingmaker with 14 seats, and thorny negotiations are expected in the coming weeks to build a coalition government. Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen, a social democrat who has been in office since 2019, was widely seen as the favorite in opinion polls running up to the election after standing up to U.S. President Donald Trump over Greenland. She told supporters that she's ready to stay on as Prime Minister.
European Central Bank Chief Christine Lagarde said that the ECB has several options for dealing with the Middle East war energy crisis on Wednesday. Lagarde insisted the ECB was well positioned to deal with the turmoil, with inflation currently close to its 2% target and the Eurozone economy on a sound footing.
We have a strategy that is built for a world of higher uncertainty, with risks and scenarios at its core. We have a graduated set of options for responding, and we are starting from a better place should we need to act. And we will not act before we have sufficient information on the size and persistence of the shock and its propagation.
At its most recent meeting last week, the ECB kept interest rates on hold as expected, while warning of higher inflation and lower growth due to the war. But analysts now expect the central bank to raise interest rates as early as next month to curb a likely rise in consumer prices. Higher global oil and gas costs have led to immediate petrol price hikes in the Eurozone and brought back memories of the energy shock that followed Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine.
Found in the famous wines of Champagne and the Côte d'Or, Pinot Noir is an iconic grape variety of French vineyards and has likely been around longer than we thought. A study mapping the genome of grape seeds found at various archaeological sites traced this fruit in the same genetic form to a trash bin dating from the 15th century.
Ça veut dire que le XVe siècle, c'est un siècle célèbre pour la fin de la guerre de 100 ans, par exemple. C'est celui qui a vu la fin de Jeanne d'Arc. Eh bien, donc on peut imaginer finalement que Jeanne d'Arc a pu croiser les mêmes fruits de la vigne que ceux que l'on produit aujourd'hui.
While it was indeed consumed, scientists do not know whether the inhabitants of Valenciennes in the 15th century consumed it as juice, wine, or table grapes. Beyond the consumption habits of the French in the Middle Ages, the sequencing results primarily illustrate the use of agricultural methods identical to those of today. The reason Pinot Noir's DNA hasn't changed is that for 600 years, winemakers have propagated their wines through cuttings to preserve the variety's signature characteristics.
On fait une grosse étude aussi en ce moment sur rechercher ces vieux cépages parce qu'en fait ça nous apporte, on va dire, énormément de choses sur le climat qui change, des cépages qui vont être aussi plus résistants. Et donc pour nous, on va dire que c'est quelque chose qu'on regarde énormément et sur lequel on travaille pour essayer de recréer toujours cette dynamique avec des cépages assez ancestraux.
According to the study, evidence of various propagation techniques, such as cuttings, has been found in French grapes dating back to the Iron Age over 2,500 years ago, and evidence of the exchange of French grapes cutting has been found from Spain to the Middle East during the Roman period.